So, the Surface Pro versus the iPad Pro. As a drawing device, well, I've had both of them. I had the Surface Pro for about a year and a half. This was a Surface Pro 4, the i5 model, with 8 gigs of RAM. I actually had 3 of them. Uh, the first one I received was constantly shutting down due to overheating. It would just black out the screen and be done. So, mailed that into Microsoft. They honored my warranty, sent me another one in the mail, and when I got it, it didn't look great. It was scratched to hell on the back. The sides were dinged up. Not a good start, but it looked like it was just cosmetic, so I was willing to overlook that since it'd be in a case anyway, and I really just needed it for my artwork. Well, it's all fine and good for a day or two. The thing is, on the Surface Pro, there is a sheet of glass that is glued to the metal body. And this is not user removable, anything like that. They can probably only do it in factory. Well, that started to separate from the body, which meant the pen input was crap at that point. Could not get a solid line, could not sketch, and it was starting to give like a gap in between the body and the top of the glass. Well, there's really nothing I could do to fix this short of putting uh, glue on it myself. So instead of doing this through the mail, because it took forever, it took like 2 weeks, I decided to go into the Microsoft store. It's about an hour drive away. I took it into the store, and it was not a great experience. The employee that was helping me out, he was like not having it. He did not want to do the exchange. He did not think this was um, damage that was, what do you say? Let's say he thought it was damage that I had done, so user damage. So just treating me like crap the whole time. I finally convinced him. I'm like, what could I possibly have done to this short of microwaving it to get the glue to separate from the body? And he decided to honor the warranty and swap it out for another unit. Uh, After that whole experience, though, I just decided, you know what? I'm done with this thing. I can't handle it anymore. Taking it back and forth reminds me of an Xbox 360 when they launched. Not having that. So I decided to sell it. I sold it for way less than what Microsoft's asking used, or for what most people on Craigslist or whatever are asking for. So, because I didn't want to rip anybody else off, and I told the guy I sold it to him, like, hey, look, these are the problems I had with it. I'm giving you a huge discount. I'm going to use this money and just get something else because I need something for class. So I did that, and I ended up getting the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch one, the big one, because you want to have as much space as you can when you're drawing or painting. And yeah, and that's been great. Well, actually, not great in the beginning. So the day I got my iPad Pro, I got the Apple Pencil with it, of course, and took them out of the box. So fresh out of the box, never touched. And I started sketching, and big scratch right in the middle of the screen from the Apple Pencil, which was a great start. But I got this one at Best Buy, so I took it back, and they're like, "Oh, no big deal. We'll swap it." They swapped it out, got another one. So you have to have a screen protector for the iPad Pro. It is not optional. Get a screen protector. That way, it doesn't get scratched somewhere down the line. You have to pay a ton of money to Apple to get them to fix it. So after that, everything's been pretty great. So I can really, now having spent a lot of time with the iPad Pro, I can kind of talk about the differences between the two and which one's better, which, spoiler alert, is the iPad Pro is much better. But, so first, battery life between the two. The Surface Pro 4, the battery life is not great. Microsoft advertises something stupid like 8 or 9 hours. You're not going to get 8 or 9 hours. Okay, you're gonna get 3 to 4. At least in my experience, 3 to 4. Running Sketchbook Pro, lowest possible brightness, Wi-Fi off, everything off except for I think Bluetooth to keep the pen running. Yeah, about 4 hours, and it gets hot. The screen gets hot, the back gets hot, the fans are going like crazy. And yeah, that sucks. It really sucks when you're in class or in lecture or whatever. because you need to find a table if you're going to take notes with it that has a plugin, which you can't always do. Usually those are taken, so that's not great. In comparison, the iPad, and I can get through the whole day with an iPad at a reasonable brightness, not the lowest possible setting, but reasonable. Running Procreate, drawing, sketching, painting, I can get through a whole day, just charged at the end of the day overnight, and it's good to go. Talking about the drawing experience between the two, the iPad Pro just destroys the Surface. The Apple Pencil is so much more responsive. It's kind of ridiculous. The Surface Pro does have parallax. If you don't know, that's where the tip of the pen is off center from the cursor that you're drawing with. So you'll be drawing slightly off. All your marks will be slightly off, which you can adjust to it and get used to it, but it's still kind of annoying, at least in the beginning. The iPad does not have that issue at all whatsoever. I have not noticed any parallax at all. The sensitivity is better, the latency is better. It's the closest digital thing I've ever used to drawing on actual paper. It's pretty crazy. I've actually, while I was still in class, I showed it to some professors to play around with and sketch on. Professors that have sworn off digital work, that are really old school, and one of them actually went out and bought the iPad Pro the next day. So that tells you a little bit of something of how good the drawing and sketching experience is on the iPad. The screens between the two are besides the iPad being way brighter, you can pump that thing up super bright, but in terms of color and contrast, they're pretty similar. They're pretty close to each other. You're not gonna, if you switch from one to the other, you're probably not gonna notice any difference at all, besides the iPad, the 12.9-inch iPad being slightly bigger. So the pencil is great. The Surface Pen is not terrible, but it's like a Wacom. I mean, it feels maybe a year or two older than the device itself, and the Surface Pro 4 is considered outdated, but really the new Surface Pro, or just Surface Pro, is the same thing with a very slightly bigger battery, which I've heard gives you maybe 1 or 2 more hours a time, and the i5 model is now fanless, but they're pretty much the same thing. And I was using the new Surface Pen as well. I wasn't using the older one. And the battery life on the Surface Pro Pen is really good. It's a quadruple A battery, and it's about a yearly battery, so every year you have to get a new one, which is not a big deal. It's great. It lasts a long time. The Apple Pencil is not like that at all. It's rechargeable, so you don't need to buy batteries, but it is not going to last you more than a day, probably. But on the good side of this is it recharges about 30 minutes from 0 to 100, and it's good to go. So the real big difference between both devices is the operating system. So Surface Pro is going to run Windows 8 if you get a Surface Pro 4, but then you'll just upgrade to 10, and then if you get one of the newer ones, it's going to be Windows 10. And then, of course, the iPad is just running, Apple iOS. It's what it runs. So that's a mobile operating system. So it's not going to have the same amount of utility that something like Windows is going to have. But there is one thing that the iPad Pro doesn't have to deal with, and that's the constant Windows 10 updates, like 2 a day, that lock you out of your work or close work that you're currently working on, forcing you to lose work, to update your computer, to have some kind of stupid social online connected thing that you don't want anyway, that you're just going to have to disable. So that sucks. That kind of kills the experience a lot, I think, with any computer running Windows 10, but it really hurts the Surface Pro. If you want that as a mobile workstation, as your portable studio, that's going to hamper it. That's really going to hamper it, and it sucks. I've lost a lot of work. I've lost tons of animation work because of forced updates. Now, the iPad Pro does update, but I've never had it force update like that. It's always me going in specifically telling it, okay, time to update, and it updates. It's not a big deal and it's over quick. It does most of the download and stuff in the background. You don't even know it's there. It's really seamless, and it doesn't take you out of it. So I've never lost any work on the iPad. But since it is a mobile operating system, it's much harder to manage files and transfer things. Forget writing a document on the iPad Pro. You're not going to write anything in a word processor in the iPad Pro. I mean, I'm sure there's roundabout ways to do it, but a lot of file managing and stuff like that, you're going to have to do it in roundabout ways. For me, what I do with my artwork, since I'm working in Procreate most of the time, is I just upload those to my Google Drive and then pull those on my computer. And one of the reasons you're going to want to do that is, well, Procreate is really, really good, and it's a lot cheaper than Photoshop since it's a one-time purchase and you own it, no subscription crap. It's really great, but it is not as fully featured as Photoshop, so it's worth having Photoshop on another system that you can pull your work into for color adjustments, final touches if you need to put text, anything like that. Your iPad's going to be just for the drawing, the painting. Is anything that is close to traditional work is going to be iPad. With the Surface, it was all kind of in one, but I still used my main computer for editing, for color correcting, for type, because it was just easier. The Surface does come with a keyboard, or wait, does it come with the keypad? I don't remember if it comes with the keypad or not. But the pen is separate, I believe. Anyway, one or both of those things is separate. They're like $100 each, which is a lot. But anyway, I really struggled to use that keypad. It's nice for its size, and I haven't used anything small and portable keyboard-wise that is as good as the Surfaces, but really when you have a large full-size desktop as an option, you're going to use that every time. So I didn't get a lot of use out of that unless I was like doing a quick email or I had to write a paper and could not get home. Then I would use it. But heat is a big issue with the Surface Pro. Man, using it in a room, it has to be plugged in. It's the middle of summer. It's got to be plugged in or it's going to die. And you're already hot from the temperature, and then this thing is just heating you up, and you're just sweating there over your work while it's electrocuting your arm. Is not a great experience. There's been several weeks of work like that I've done with the Surface Pro. Not great. The iPad really does not get hot, maybe a little warm, but nowhere near as hot as the Surface. And it's all passively cooled too, so you won't have to hear the fans going all the time, which is really nice. And as far as performance goes, you have, a mobile CPU, an i5 or an i7 if you choose to get the i7 model, and 8 gigs. I think it goes up to 16 gigs of RAM versus the iPad. The iPad is really quick. I don't know exactly all the specs of the iPad. I could not say if it's more powerful than the Surface Pro, but it certainly felt like it was, because everything is snappy, nothing lags, everything works fantastically and is very smooth, whereas on the Surface Pro, a lot of stuff did struggle to run. Photoshop struggled a lot. If you try to play games on it, it's not going to happen. Even low-spec games are just going to overheat it anyway until it goes to sleep. So, iPad, it sucks that Apple is so adamantly against using controllers unless you buy a very specific Apple-approved thing. That sucks. It's not like Android where you can just connect pretty much anything. So I don't have a controller for it, but it's been fine. The Surface, of course, has one USB in, so it can do a 360 controller, whatever you've got. DS4, DualShock 4, and it'll run that, but it's not going to run any games. And most of the older PC games that it's going to be able to run at all, that's before controller support on computer games was really a thing, so you're going to have to use a keyboard and mouse anyway. The only game I really ever played on my Surface Pro was Morrowind, and even that I had to crank it down. I had to drop the resolution just to get it to run. and it would get super hot, and the fan would be going like after a minute and a half of Morrowind on low. Um, Now, of course, there's nothing like Morrowind on iPad, but there is good stuff. I don't need to sit here and recommend games, but play Darkest Dungeon. The art style in that is incredible. Play that one. So yeah, between the two, get the iPad Pro. It's about the same price, maybe a little bit more than a Surface, but if you want to make quality digital artwork and have a great user experience and also have entertainment to go along with that, the iPad Pro is going to be your best bet. It is so easy to take with you and to travel with. It's so easy to keep charged. It's so easy to charge the pencil. Everything works out of the box. All of the drawing apps are optimized for touch input, so you're never going to break your flow. Everything's always right under your fingertips where it needs to be, and it's just a better experience. And that's one of the biggest things when you're making digital art is breaking that flow. You don't want to lose that flow. Just like when you're working traditional, when you really get into a sketch or a painting, you don't want anything to interrupt you, because then that can break the whole deal, and then you might be done for the day. At least for me, that's how it is. And the iPad Pro never was broken out of it. It has also a cool feature. You can dual screen, so like you would split screen on Windows, you can do that and have your reference on one side and your work on the other side, and just really quickly go back and forth between. It just works so much better. The Surface Pro, I don't know, maybe another generation or two they might get it right, but I think that my whole experience with Surface Pro has really steered me away from that product. I'm willing to try Surface Studio, but not at the price Microsoft is asking. Probably won't ever go back to Surface Pro or a Microsoft made product. Go with the iPad Pro. And I have to say also, this is not coming from an Apple fanboy. I really am not a huge fan of Apple. I would never buy a MacBook. I won't run a Windows PC, but the iPad Pro is the best mobile drawing device I've used and can easily be your whole studio in one. Alright, thanks.